In just a few minutes, we'll be showing you some examples of how Newired can help to create a pleasant user experience in a complex application lifecycle management environment. But before we do that, I'll take just a moment to introduce Newired and our UX management solution. The mission of Newired is to make complex web-based software easier to understand and use by providing improved user experience and productivity without the risk and cost of modifying existing software. We'll tell you more about the Newired approach in today's session. Today we are looking into Newired journeys as a tool to help with adoption, training and productivity for users of the IBM Jazz platform and its tools. Leading the session today is Robert Palomo, Product Communication Manager at Newired. He will introduce today's guest. Robert, we turn the session over to you.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the session. In just a moment, I will introduce our webinar guest. Before we do that, for those of you not yet familiar with Newired Journeys, I'll just say a few brief words of introduction about the solution. Newired Journeys is a new enterprise UX management technology and toolset designed to improve user experience with complex web-based software applications. It eliminates the costs and risks of UX improvements that would require changes to existing software. Basically, you can take the web-based software you already have and make it much easier for end users to learn, understand, and work with it. Newired Journeys can reduce the need for extensive initial training, and it can improve the ROI of your initial training that you're already doing. It can reduce time to competence and ensure optimal user productivity ongoing. Among other use cases, Newired Journeys helps with training and onboarding, which is the main subject of today's webinar. And with us is Mr. Angelo Corna from IBM Watson Internet of Things Lab Services. Angelo is the consultant for IBM Rational applications. So welcome, Angelo, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Robert. For my side, it's very interesting to see new solutions that could belong to Jet's platform ecosystem.
So let's start by talking about the problems you were experiencing that made Newired interesting for you. What main areas did you have where you felt that it could help your organization?
Well, there are three top-level areas where we thought we like to make some improvements. We are talking about training, collaboration across application lifecycle management teams, and the lifecycle process customization.
Okay, super. I'd like to talk about each one of those in more depth, but before we do that, could you first tell us a little about your situation at IBM? How many users, their main roles, the software landscape, where you're deploying Newired Journeys, things like that?
Sure. Imagine the case we face very often. In a medium company, we have around 200 people who need to work with applications running on IBM Jet's platform. In my particular area, and that means application lifecycle management, we have teams who are using platform tools for requirement management, change request management, and this means definition and planning, software configuration management, build management, and test orchestration. All of these activity, they have defined processes, workflows, and operation. Some of those can be pretty complex, and they can create a need for collaboration across team borders.
Okay, good. So let's jump into those UX improvement areas you mentioned earlier, starting with training. What are some of the issues and challenges you face with that?
Well, in any company, training is pretty complex and expensive thing. And when you have a bigger company, it gets even more complex and more expensive. We have 200 employees who need to work with the Rational application on the Jet platform. To train them using traditional methodologies, we would have to divide them into classes of maximum 25 or 30 people, and then deliver the same training session multiple times.
I see. So if you had 8 classes of say, 25 people, you'd need 8 training sessions presenting the same materials.
Yes, and that's pretty expensive right there, with just the direct costs of trainers, training materials, and facilities. Then, on top of that, when people are in training session, they aren't being productive in their actual job. So that adds to the overall cost of the company.
And it's not as if people can learn everything they need to be productive just from training sessions, right? I mean, none of us can immediately retain big masses of information.
Exactly. So it takes quite some time after training for people to get full productive. And then maybe there have to be some follow up training, which again cost a lot.
And then of course, well, there will eventually be changes. I mean, new software features, updated workflows, what have you.
Yes, sooner or later. And so people have to relearn their job or some part of it. And of course, you can get a lot of resistance to that.
So, Angelo, can you tell us how you see that Newired journeys can help you in the training and onboarding area?
Well, the main benefit for us is potential to reduce overall costs. We can use Newired to create a really comprehensive guidance through every workflow and every operation. And we can do that independently for the actual application. So we don't risk breaking anything and we don't change anything for people who are already the expert users.
Right. And I guess then even the experts might need some refresher sometimes.
Oh, yes, of course. There might be some task or operation that they don't do all the time. The good thing about Newired is that there's always the guidance layer available to anybody right at the place it's needed. So people don't need to worry if they don't remember every detail from the initial training.
Why don't we show our attendees a short demo video of how that can work?
Great, let's do it.
Okay, so our guys at the New Wired Development Labs have got the Jazz platform set up and running there. And we've made a very short, simple example that, first of all, shows how New Wired kind of sits on top of Jazz in the browser, how users can launch and select journeys for different operations, and then just a short example of a journey for a simple task. So everybody stand by just a moment and let's get the video rolling. So here we see Newired running on top of the IBM Jazz platform. Down in the corner, you see the little launcher widget that users can invoke to pop up a list of the journeys that have been created for the site or the web app, and they can search or browse through that. Now, you might think that something like a login is ultra simple and you wouldn't want to create a journey for that, but you need to think and not really assume that users know everything. And in some kind of a corporate environment, maybe there are things they need to know even at the login stage. So you can guide them in every step of even the most simple processes like this. You notice that when the user began typing there, the guidance passed to the next data entry field. That's one of the options that you can use for transitioning. And when it comes down to enter the password, there's some advice there, as you can see, about how to store the password. And you can optionally attach the steps in a journey to visual elements on the different pages. And so it means that users don't have to go out to a manual. They just stay with their task and they end up succeeding every single time. And that's the great thing about this kind of solution.
That's a good example, even if it's very simple. It's really easy to forget that different people can perceive things differently and make different assumptions. This kind of solution can make sure that everyone is always on the same page.
Excellent. Well, let's move along to another area you mentioned, the collaboration across teams. What have been your challenges there, and how is Newired helping?
Well, the JETS platform encourages and manages collaboration, and it provides a set of tools for that. But users must first know this tool exists, the general purpose of each tool, and then how they use each one. Then they must carefully follow the workflow, which can be complex, and sometimes they have to understand certain concept or option before they can proceed. This is especially true when the process crosses some team boundaries, from requirements to test management, for example.
I see. So the complexity then reduces user confidence, especially when there is a possibility to cross into less familiar territory.
Yes, that's often the case. And sometimes user might not understand that they actually can do certain things and that it's better if they will do them. Some proactive action required some collaboration with some other team.
And how do you see that Newired journeys can help with that?
The Jet platform provides a whole series of tools to automatically notify stakeholders that they are part of the software lifecycle. The challenge is to get people to use those tools in the way and at the time established by the implemented process. We see that Newired can help ensure visibility of the tools and explain the right way to use them as people actually go through the process.
All right, great. So our clock is ticking. So why don't we move along and take a look at the third area you mentioned, life cycle process customization. Now that seems like a pretty far jump away from the other areas, especially training and onboarding. And I don't think it's an area that would occur to me anyway, to think about using a solution like Newired Journeys. So maybe you can talk a little about what led you in that direction.
This one actually comes from our experience as a support provider. In many smaller companies, the role of application lifecycle management tool administrator or software configuration manager, whatever it may be called, anyway, this role is covered by people with other tasks. That often means that some developer doesn't have time to truly explore the configuration capability of the tool. So they miss out of exploiting the full potential of the Jets platform.
I see. And so that then what results in a lot of support cases?
Sometimes, yes, but it mainly means that people can have a hard time working productively. The Jet platform is fully documented, but the documentation is a very large body of content. These admin type users are often under pressure to get something up and running quickly. The information they need in order to perform some operation probably does exist in the documentation, but finding it can be time consuming.
And it's an interruption of their workflow as well, right?
Definitely, the user is working in the platform and has to jump away to something else, I mean a manual or even a traditional online app system, and it is an interruption. And then when they find the information, they have to jump back and forth from the platform user interface to documentation to complete the work. It's just not very efficient.
And how does then Newired Journeys help that situation?
Well, as a support providers, we know what are the most common tasks and operations that tool administration or configuration manager have to do with the Jets platform.
Can you like give us a specific example, maybe?
Sure. A couple of pretty common things are, for example, define a new work item type or registering a new Jets user.
Okay, and then how does something like Newired Journeys help?
As I said, since we know the most common things, we realize that we can use the new wired system to create journeys just for these configuration management users. Because the URLs for this feature are different from those of the feature that other type of user access, we can present this class of users with task-specific contextual guidance just for the things they need to do. They don't have to pick what they need out of a lot of info that is just for the end users.
I see. So you could then create a list of journeys with names like define a new work item type or register a new system user, and these are only shown to configuration managers.
Exactly. We can create set based on the URL of the configuration management main page.
And what's the advantage over, say, a traditional online help system?
The thing with the new Wired is that guidance for every step of an operation or task is attached to something in the UI of the configuration management page. The user doesn't have to keep jumping back and forth. And if they already know what to do at the step, they just ignore the guidance info and proceed. But if they don't know, then all the info they need is right there at the exact place they are working, the field or the option or whatever. It's a much more efficient way to work. The users stay within the flow of their workflow all the time.
Well, we've got another short demo video of a Newired journey that illustrates these points. It's guiding a user through a common task, that of creating a new requirement artifact by importing a document. So everyone stand by just a moment while we get that going. Okay, so we're continuing the same journey that we saw in the first demo. You can see this little guidance bubble, as we call it, and it's pointing exactly to what the user needs to do to start this process of importing a new artifact onto the Jazz platform. And a big page is coming up, and maybe the user has seen this in training, and oh my gosh, what do I do here now? Well, again, the little journey step bubble pops up and points at exactly the place and exactly the thing that the user needs to do to take the next step and keep this process going. You don't really spend a lot of time wondering what's next, and you can, in these little bubbles, you can see this one doesn't have a lot of information, but you can put as much information in there as you need, different formatting, you can put images in there, whatever it takes so that the user understands what's going on at this point in a process. And of course, option dialogues, it's great for that. A user may have seen this before, but oh, which one do I choose? I don't remember from training. Well, again, the journey is very clear for this particular use case, this process that you're doing. This is what you need to select, and away you go. What formats can you import? Well, the software says, but maybe there's some other information that needs to be provided here. You can do that in these little journey bubbles, whatever the user really needs to know in order to succeed, that maybe the software doesn't actually already tell them. And it's quite clear then that you're finished, you've succeeded, you've done everything needs to be done. The journey is ending, as you can see down there on the little end journey button. And so by just following the journey, maybe this is a thing you don't do every day, but you don't have to think about it. You don't have to go out to some other resource, a manual or a help system or some classroom training notes. You just succeed at the task with the software you have. I should point out here for our webinar participants that while it may look like Newired is somehow integrated into the Jazz platform, it's actually completely independent. It's running on a different web server hosted in corporate IT infrastructure. In a browser, the Newired guidance is just overlaid visually on top of the main web application, in this case, the IBM Jazz platform. Angelo, what about creating the actual journeys for end users? Who is doing or who will be doing that?
Well, really, anybody who had the knowledge. On my team, everyone is pretty technical and they could use just about any tool. But sometimes the guidance is better written by someone with expert knowledge. But their work doesn't revolve around software tool. It may be a department manager, maybe even a sales engineering or manager. However it is, we can just give them the new wired editor application for the PC. And it's very much like a word processor. So really, anyone can start using it right away.
All right. Well, we have been talking with Angelo Corna from IBM Watson Internet of Things Lab Services, who's the consultant for IBM Rational applications. Angelo, thank you very much for taking time to share your insights with us today.
My pleasure, Robert.
We'll go back now to Lucia Manetti, Marketing Director at Newired, and she will talk for just a moment about how you can send in any questions you may have and how to keep in touch with what's happening at Newired. So, Lucia, over to you.
Thanks, Robert. This concludes our presentation for today. Very big thanks again to Angelo Corna for taking time to speak with us. If you have any questions or comments, you can still tag them into the chat and we will answer you by email. or you can contact us later via our website at www.newired.com. We also invite you to follow us on our blog or on the social media channels you see here. And finally, speaking for the entire Newired team, we want to thank you all for taking your time to find out more about Newired. So, we are finished for today, and we hope to see you again soon.